I'm not an economist. I'm not a historian. I don't know anything about tariffs, so I'm going to learn. I put together like, I don't know, 10 clips on the controversy of tariffs. Everyone's talking about it, so we got to learn this stuff, guys. Welcome to the Doug TeNapel channel. Let's watch. This is Lutnick. We're going to start with him. This is going to get crazy. I promise you, it's going to be a blast.
So what's happened to the world is the global governments have backed taking our factories away from us. I mean, there's nothing about Taiwan that they should be making semiconductors. There's nothing about Korea. They should be making all of the appliances and the electronics of the world. What's happened is they had a policy of their governments to let's back our companies and let's take this business from America while America's not paying attention. So our factories went overseas. But what you're going to see is the most modern factories of the world come back here. We are going to start on one of the great training programs of the world to teach our employees what tradecraft is, how to build factories, and not the old kind of factories. I'm talking the most modern, the most high-tech factories. When you say HVAC, what we're talking about is cooling a high-tech semiconductor plant, probably one of the coolest jobs you can have, right? Mechanics, fixing robotics. That's what's coming to America. The coolest factories, the highest tech factories, they're all coming home, and Donald Trump is bringing them home, and he's going to create a renaissance of high-tech manufacturing in America. That's why America's going to win.
Okay, so that's the pie in the sky. Happy good news about tariffs. Not super controversial. Let's go to Scott Bessent on, we're going to get a lot of history, guys. They're going to reference everyone. Here's Scott Bessent on Alexander Hamilton and tariffs.
Go back all the way to Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton used them to raise revenue. He used them to protect industry. And President Trump has added the third leg of the stool, which is strategic. So, if we are thinking about a 10% global tariff, and let's assume that we import about $3 trillion a year, so that's $300 billion, and that's a substantial revenue raiser that could then be used for working Americans on no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime.
Okay, no tax on overtime. I got to get into this just a second. Scott Bessent is talking about the money that America will make off our tariffs. We have to pay for the things that Trump has proposed, like no tax on tips. You have to offset that loss of revenue. And this is all of our accounting in the government that Trump has to pay for it. Where do you get the extra money without raising taxes? We're going to try and get them from tariffs. That's Scott Bessent. I doubt it, but I'm only saying that's the pie in the sky, positive case for tariffs.
And for those buying autos, they can reduce their bills because interest on American-made cars will be tax deductible. So this is really a working class, the tariff and tax.
Caitlin Collins is a little lost on words on that one, as am I, but let's keep going. There's more. This is Senator Bernie Moreno on Trump's plan with taxes. Let's go.
We also have to remember we're creating the best tax environment on earth. We're going to make the 2017 tax reform permanent that put more money in working class Americans' pockets. We're going to get rid of taxes on overtime, tips, and Social Security. We've massively lowered regulations, especially around energy. So energy prices are lower. You see what's going on with eggs, what's going on with gas. So you're lowering the cost of everything else and then raising wages. So you got to look at, prices go up 2 or 3%, but if real wages go up 5 or 6, which is the opposite of what happened during Biden, you have massive inflation and wages couldn't keep up. Yeah. So Americans will feel it. Plus, you got to remember, one of the things we haven't talked about well enough is $6 trillion in investment. I think the stock market is going to majorly correct upwards because when you pump $6 trillion of investment, that's only what's been announced so far. I think the stock market's going to go very, very high because you're investing $6 trillion in the United States. That's never happened before.
Okay, so that's the positive case. Again, I'm getting all this pie in the sky non-drama stuff yet.
His policy of reciprocity is exactly right. There has to be a level playing field. For many decades, all these foreign countries have not played by the rules. You know, you can talk about free trade all you want. They have high tariffs, very high tariffs, low wages. They erect enormous barriers. They're tariff and non-tariff barriers. Sometimes they're currency barriers to prevent us from exporting to them. That's done a lot of damage to our economy, particularly industrial goods, the industrial heartland. It's just what the president said yesterday. Reciprocity is the right now. The transition, okay, I mean, I'm reading crazy things, for heaven's sakes. People saying globalism is in, no more global trade. Yes, of course, there'll be plenty of global trade, but there has to be a level playing field. We're not even close to fair trade.
Wait till you guys see Rand Paul oppose these tariffs and just tear into Trump and his administration. That's Rand Paul. So here's a little warning for you all. You're all, what's so bad about tariffs? Well, here's Ronald Reagan on tariffs.
For those of us who lived through the Great Depression, the memory of the suffering it caused is deep and searing. And today, many economic analysts and historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period, called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, greatly deepened the Depression and prevented economic recovery. You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is, first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition.
I'm going to disagree with him for just a second because I am pro-tariff, but I'm also pro-Reagan. I think the problem is that, look, for the last, 40 years, we've been losing a war on tariffs. We've been sending our money overseas, and we're not getting any of it back. They're losing businesses to overseas. So now you can't just stop doing tariffs. I believe in Trump's tariffs as being slightly retaliatory, slightly reciprocal. That is, we have to fight this battle for just a little bit to remove pressure to remove all the tariffs. So in theory, I think I agree with Reagan that tariffs are bad. I don't think short-term tariffs are bad. I think they're a useful tool.
So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity. Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group.
Okay,
those of us who
that's Ronald Reagan, and that directly affects Trump. So that's the other side of it, even from but I want to show you how opposing tariffs used to be a Republican thing, and now being pro-tariff is a Trumpy thing. Okay, look. Now here's Mitch McConnell agreeing with Reagan and opposing Trump. Mitch McConnell just voted with the Senate Democrats to terminate President Trump's tariffs on Canada, 51-48. The House must look at this. Speaker Johnson. McConnell is brain dead and shouldn't have a vote to begin with. What's going on? Why is our own U.S. Senate siding with a foreign nation?
Which is the largest retailer in America and also, by the way, the largest employer in America. You slap on tariffs and all the stuff they buy in China is going to jump in price. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure. Let me talk to your camera.
All right.
When I was a kid, Converse All-Stars were the best tennis shoes made, and the Keds cost $3 and they cost $5 a pair. Now you can get them from Indonesia for $150 a pair. Do you really think it costs that much to make them? Of course not. That's just what they charge in the United States over and above how much it costs to make them over there. Listen, you bring these things back to the United States, well, everybody's going to have to compete here. The idea that, as long as you got that tariff, you take all that revenue, cut the taxes on producers here, and they will beat everybody in the world.
So markets don't really work.
Markets, look, I believe in a freer market than we have right now, but I do believe in national borders for markets. What kind of globalist says it's a good thing if our factories move from here to China?
Last question on
because
trade.
maybe we get something cheaper.
Are you signed up then with the Romney program on China? To tell you the truth, I don't understand the details. Right. I'm not sure he's laid out a detailed policy. I haven't found it on his website yet, but he's clearly riled about China in a healthy way.
He is. And,
it's a start.
Well, listen, I've seen, Mitt Romney has talked about, he has said, people say if we do this, we're going to be in a trade war. You say, what do they think we're in now? Peter, the last year, we had a trade deficit of something like $550 billion trade deficit.
They send us real goods. They send us real objects, and we give them pieces of promissory notes.
Well, we give them the same promissory notes that put this country in debt. And what do they do with those notes? They go and buy the resources of Australia, of Africa, all the rest of it. Well, we're out there with our foreign aid and all the rest of it. They are serious people. Look. The Chinese are sacrificing now, as you say, they're taking paper, their people are underpaid.
Sacrificing consumption for sure.
They're sacrificing the present for the future, and we're sacrificing the future for the present. They will own the future as we own the present.
Okay, I'm just going to go up a little farther in this chat. Here's Western Lensman, where I pull a lot of my material from. Rand Paul just co-sponsored with Mitch McConnell. Susan Collins, Murkowski voted for it. Ploy of Dems to show and expose weakness of certain Republicans, as per Trump. Nick Sorter says they're undermining the president of the United States. Anyone surprised? Mitch McConnell is a Democrat. Mitch is disgraced, who is spending his final days in office trying to destroy Trump. Okay, and here's Rand Paul over on Simon Ateba, says Senator Rand Paul obliterates Donald Trump. Taxation without representation is tyranny, he says.
Bellowed James Otis. In the days and weeks and years leading up to the American Revolution, this became the rallying cry of American patriots. No taxation without representation. The American patriots thought that a distant parliament in England, where they had no representation, had no right to tax them. This was the rallying cry, no taxation without representation. Our founding fathers believed so strongly in this, they embodied it in our Constitution. Our Constitution doesn't allow any one man or woman to raise taxes. It must be the body of Congress. Now, this wasn't new. This was part of maybe a 1,000-year tradition from Magna Carta on. In Magna Carta...
Okay, Rand Paul with the Magna Carta. Thank you. The main argument he's making is that for a president to impose tariffs is taxation without representation. It is the president starting a tax. Remember, this is what we jumped on Obama about with Obamacare, where we said Obamacare is a forced tax. He's forcing us to pay for our medical, and it is a tax. And then it went to the Supreme Court, and John Roberts sided with the Democrats and said, oh, it's not a tax, but it's a tax. And if that's a tax, then so is a tariff, and it's a tax without representation. There you go. Now here's Batya Ungar Sargon on the Piers Morgan Show.
What I find so frustrating about the conversation around tariffs is that we all agree on the problem. We all agree that the deindustrialization of America led to the downward mobility of the American working class, deaths of despair, people working multiple jobs and not being able to afford the American dream. We all agree that it is deeply unfair for the American middle class to be bearing the burden of unfair tariffs from other countries. We all agree that it is great for the president to have leverage in order to demand reasonable things, like that countries stop allowing fentanyl to murder 100,000 Americans every year, and that Mexico do its part to police its own border. And yet when somebody has the courage to show up and say to Wall Street, screw you, I am waging war, I'm waging class warfare on behalf of the American working class, and you elites in Wall Street, you do what you need to do because I'm not going to stop fighting for the American working class. Suddenly, everybody is sitting around going, oh no, the stock market. Yeah, the stock market looks like that because the rich are punishing Trump for siding with the neglected and humiliated American working class over them. We have already seen these tariffs work, Pierce. The number of people crossing the southern border is at 0. Fentanyl is at record lows for the last 10 years. We have already seen $1.2 trillion in manufacturing invested in this country since January 21st. So they have already worked. Now, how long is Wall Street going to keep trying to punish this president for standing the American working class? I don't know, but I can tell you that the view from the street is people cannot believe that there is a president who is working for them, who is putting them first and telling Wall Street to go screw itself. Wall Street, which picked the Democrats for the last 3 election cycles in a row. That's what the real story is here.
Okay, that's just a great quote. I love her. I don't know much about her, but I agree with her. She's a Democrat that voted for Trump for the first time. Here's Trump signing the tariffs in the Rose Garden. This is called Liberation Day. Everyone's clapping. That was Wednesday. Here's Trump with more on the tariffs.
Coming days, there will be complaints from the globalists and the outsourcers and special interests and the fake news. Always, the fake news will always complain. But never forget, every prediction our opponents made about trade for the last 30 years has been proven totally wrong. They were wrong about NAFTA. They were wrong about China. They were wrong about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have been a disaster if I didn't terminate it. If I didn't terminate that, United Auto Workers, you would have had no jobs in this country. You would have had no jobs. It was all going to other countries. In my first term, they said tariffs would crash the economy. Instead, we built the greatest economy in the history of the world. And again, I have great respect for President Xi of China, great respect for China, but they were taking tremendous advantage of us, and I commend them for that. I say, hey, if you can get away with it, that's okay. But, they understand exactly what's happening, and they probably, most of them are saying it's about time they did something, but, and they're going to fight, and they're going to fight fair. Everyone's going to fight. It's like, I say to the leaders, look, you got to take care of your country, but we have to start taking care of our country now. We can't do what we've been doing for the last 50 years.
Okay, that's Trump making a reasonable case for his tariffs. Now, here's one you don't expect. Here's Schumer back in 2018 being pro-Trump tariffs.
Look, I think the president's doing the right thing. China has been taking advantage of us for two decades. They're stealing our intellectual property, which means stealing our good-paying jobs. And I, frankly, am closer on this issue, not on many, but on this issue with President Trump than I was with Presidents Bush or Obama.
Okay, there's some strange bedfellows, guys. I just want to call this out to show you how weird and mutated. Right now, we are in agreement with Chuck Schumer and in disagreement with Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul. How's that?
Because they did nothing to tell China off. Now, China, of course, will respond. But if they know we're strong and we're not going to back off, they will back off. They have far more to lose than we do. They have a $300 billion trade surplus with us.
I love it when Democrats make Trump's case because we're getting Chuck Schumer on our side. And he's against Ronald Reagan.
I'm looking out, number one, for jobs. If General Electric moves jobs to China, they're not unhappy, but my New York workers in Schenectady are unhappy. And so you can't let the international business companies who don't give a hoot about where their factories are govern this. You have to do what's good for the American worker.
Let's get back to Rand Paul. We're going to end with on his final no vote and lack of support in calling Trump out.
Tariffs have also led to political decimation. When McKinley most famously put tariffs on in 1890, they lost 50% of their seats in the next election. When Hot Smoothie put on their tariff in the early 1930s, we lost the House and the Senate for 60 years. So they're not only bad economically, they're bad politically.
So he believes we're going to lose. We could lose the House and the Senate over the tariffs. That's what's at stake, guys. Now you know the conversation and the battle that's going on. I still believe that Trump is doing what's right. I think it is. I think we do have the muscle and the strength to launch these massive tariffs and start manipulating the world markets back in our favor after losing for 40 years. Hold tight, guys. I'll give you any updates on this, but now you know the lay of the land and why it's complicated to start talking about tariffs. We support Trump. We support America. I'd love to hear what you think, especially the people that oppose tariffs. You know, these are traditional conservatives that oppose tariffs. This is allegedly against free trade. I'm Doug in exile. What do you think?